All right. How's it going, everyone? Hope you guys are doing well. We'll give it a couple minutes for people to come in here. Oh, geez. That was a lot all at once. So why don't, if you guys are here, open up the chat and say hi. Tell us where you're from. Really glad for you guys to join us today. We've got a great group. We were just talking about football. So Rick, if you want to tell us a little bit more about your team, you're welcome to.
Just Florida State guy from Tallahassee, and wing and a prayer we make it. We'll see. Lost our quarterback.
Who do you guys have, Rick? Who do you guys play this weekend?
I don't even know. The second stringer got kind of banged up.
Against
Florida.
Against Florida.
Yeah. So I haven't heard on who the starting quarterback's going to be. So we'll see. Should be a good weekend for college football, though.
Yeah, my Buckeyes did not quite make it.
I was rooting for them.
Yeah.
We did not make it.
Not a fan of the blue and gold.
We need a miracle to happen for us to get in the playoffs this year, but we'll see. No, who said go blue? Get out of here.
Oh.
There you go. There you go, Brian. IO, baby.
All right. We'll give it one more minute. Seems like we got a lot of folks from everywhere. I think I saw someone from Egypt in here. It's got to be pretty late at night. Thanks for joining us. This will be recorded. That's not as important since you guys are all here, but if you know anyone who missed it, you can send them the recording, or if you see something you wanted to listen to again, we'll have this up on the Wheelhouse YouTube, where you can also see all of our previous sessions. So should be pretty good. What's up, Jasper? How's it going, man? Good to see you. Can the other panelists see the attendees who are in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see the attendees.
All right. What's up, Ben? How's it going? Is it cold up there too? It's cold in the Northwest. All right. Well, we'll let people kind of filter in. We'll keep going. And why don't we get started with just some introductions? So for those of you who haven't joined us, this is our, I think, 7th Revenue Manager Roundtable. We roughly do them every month to 6 weeks. And it's just an opportunity to bring on professional revenue managers and have a conversation about what's going on, what people are seeing in their own data, what actions they're taking among their teams, and talk a little bit revenue manager to revenue manager. My name's John DeRoulet. I'm the head of onboarding at Wheelhouse. Been a revenue manager for almost 10 years now, and lucky enough to chat with all these folks, which we'll introduce to you. Why don't we start with Whitney today?
Hi, my name is Whitney Drake. I am a senior revenue manager at 360 Blue, which is also a portion of Natural Retreats, and I am located here in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida.
And why don't you tell us also where your portfolios are located and roughly how large they are?
Yeah, so our portfolios are located on the Emerald Coast. We range from Destin to Cape San Blas, which is right on the Emerald Coast. And we manage about 800 properties on the 360 Blue brand side. But for Natural Retreat overall, I think we have right around 1,500 homes.
Perfect. And Rick?
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Rick Jernigan. I am from Harris Vacations in Gulf Shores, Alabama. So our portfolio really kind of targeted into the Orange Beach and Gulf Shores market area. A little bit of a smaller portfolio. We have about 158 homes currently, but we really try to focus for more high-end luxury homes. And that's really kind of our specialty and what we're building our brand towards. But pleasure to be here. Nice to meet everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. And Chad.
Yeah, Chad Blankenship. I am a VP at VTrips. Joined VTrips after the acquisition when they acquired Southern Vacation Rentals. I'm located in the Panhandle, Florida. We have about 5,000 units, give or take, span from Maui to New Mexico to Texas to Florida to the Carolinas, Maryland, Tennessee. So revenue management's never boring in my day-to-day.
Yeah. And Kelley.
Hi, I'm Kelley. I've been with Reven Research for about the last 8 months or so. I joined the team in March. Prior to that, I was with Cassiola and Finger Lakes Premier Properties before that. So revenue management property management specific roles. And then the consulting aspect of it with Ben and Rebecca has been really exciting. I could not tell you exactly how many markets we're in or how many properties we have. We're growing really rapidly. We've had some turnover, mostly intended on our part just to kind of trim the fat a little bit and try to prioritize, giving the best to our clients. But it's been really exciting getting into the consulting stuff, and I'm looking forward to the conversation with you all today.
Awesome.
I'm in New York, upstate New York. I don't know if that's important, but
well, this is pretty exciting. We've got a pretty good mix of revenue managers who have, what I'm really excited for today too is there's a lot of exposure to different parts of the country, which I think is really good as well, but also some pretty big focus in that southeast kind of region as well. So let's just start with kind of the basics, like what has been going on in the last quarter, really the last month. What are some trends you guys have been seeing? What are some things that your teams have been doing? Feel free to pick out of that group, but just tell us a little bit about what's been going on recently and what's been kind of on your mind. And maybe we can start with, let's start with Rick.
Yeah, so really Q4 for us is shaping up to be fantastic. We've kind of seen a little bit of a turn. I think I can probably speak for most of us here. Q2, Q3 were changing times, right? And perhaps a little bit of a struggle there. So very, very good to see that some of the strategies that we really implemented, focusing a little bit more on lowering ADR, driving occupancy a little bit more. So probably a more balanced approach throughout has definitely started to pay off throughout the holidays. We had really strong bookings for Thanksgiving, which was great. And Christmas is also outpacing last year. So awesome to see. And really, for the rest of my team and I, we're now, kind of sailing in to the tour, the back half of 2023, really starting to focus now and get our strategy in place for 2024.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about just what you maybe have implemented? Because you said, I think what you said is you changed your strategy a little bit to focus on focus on occupancy over ADR. What specifically did you kind of do, and when did you decide to make those decisions?
So honestly, we, staying on top of global trends, back in March, for my target area is really where we started to see the kind of the fall, and from where we were pacing and noticed, and honestly, kind of had to go out on a limb a little bit and start saying, hey, the demand and the pricing is not where it was during the pandemic, right? I mean, back during the pandemic days, ADR, you could almost set it and forget it, right? Now we had to take a lot more of a management style, kind of getting back into really looking at driving not just ADR and total revenue, but also looking at our occupancy. So really throughout Q2, Q3, my team and I really started kind of focusing not only internally, but also educating our owners. Things are changing. It's kind of going back to pre-pandemic type levels. We have to take a more balanced approach. And so we really started to kind of work on our ADR, lowering that, honestly, to help kind of drive some of the occupancy. And we did see that, again, really start to come to fruition towards the end of Q3, and that has carried us into Q4. So again, long story short, lowering our ADR a little bit, driving and being a little bit more focused on managing and monitoring our occupancy levels in order to still drive our revenue results.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really great. I like, you're giving us some hints here, saw some of this early, implemented it. Something that I don't think CEOs like to hear as much as revenue managers know, which is like, if it's broken, it takes a quarter to fix at least.
Yeah. But not only that, I mean, we all know the sooner that we can get out in front of this, right, and identify those trends and get out in front, the sooner we're going to see us rebound and stay with things and keep things moving in a positive direction.
Perfect. Well, I'm sure some of us will come back to some of this. Whitney, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys have been seeing in the 360 Blue?
So very, very similar to what Rick had just addressed. 360 Blue has notoriously led the market in ADR because we have very high-end homes. We pride ourselves on the luxury end of things. So it's always been engraved in my brain as a revenue manager, like push ADR, push ADR. And we have come to realize like that is no longer something. After the COVID high is over, we have now shifted to, driving occupancy while decreasing ADR. It's still likely staying ahead of the market due to the caliber of our homes, but it's been really focusing on driving that occupancy. And that's especially during our true off season, which is November, December, January, February, outside of holidays. So just becoming so much more aggressive on our pricing for our off-season dates to be far more in line with competitors, and just relaying to homeowners like, hey, we're really trying to drive, traffic to your homes. We're trying to drive occupancy, and that is going to lead you to higher revenues. So like I said, just kind of mirroring what Rick said, coming off that COVID high where everyone's expecting 15-20% growth year over year. Well, that's just not going to happen anymore. So
when did you and your team start kind of making those decisions or seeing that data, and what was kind of like an indicator for you of those trends this year?
I would say probably shortly after Labor Day, going into fall break, we were noticing some trends. Fall break was not coming in as hot as it historically had. Looking at our market competitors and seeing, where their ADR was sitting, where their occupancy was sitting, and our occupancy was sitting lower. So we had to become aggressive, and we had to start pivoting to ensure that we are going to stay in line or above the market. This kind of goes back to summer too. We have always had the 7-night Saturday minimum, and we had to drop that far sooner than we have historically to drive occupancy. So just really pivoting and thinking outside the box and figuring out what we can do to get these guests in these homes and get these homes booked. So lowering rates and looking at minimum length of stay.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Whitney. Chad, would you like to tell us a little bit about, you got a lot of choice.
Yeah. So, really, in our beach market destinations, I concur a lot with what, Whitney and Rick both said there. Really, it's a lot of ADR focus right now, and, really the driving down your, loosening up your minimum length of stay requirements is definitely a big key here. So in our beach markets right now, what we're really doing is we're doing an after action review of kind of what worked in summer, what didn't work in summer, what changes do we need to make for 24. Really what we're kind of seeing right now is 24 shaping up to be a very similar year to 23, at least what we're seeing, very similar type year. And a couple of different things that we've done this year that's a little different is, it's becoming a very promo heavy market again, is really kind of what we're seeing. And we're trying to figure out, and we've done a successful job of balancing out dynamic pricing with promo codes, right? So, our approach on that has been this year is, we're using promo codes to change consumer behavior. And what I mean by that is, if we normally get a normal LOS 4 nights in a certain market for a certain date range, we may throw a promo code out there for buy 6 at your, buy 6 nights, get your 1 night for free. So we're attempting to use promo codes in that aspect of trying to increase LOS, and not so much drop down ADRs, on those types of situations. So we're trying to get a good blend there of promo codes, dynamic pricing mixture. And then obviously in our mountain markets, right now, a lot of those are getting ready to hit ski season, peak seasons. So they're we're monitoring that as much as humanly possible, making sure that, we have everything right where it needs to be, but we're still seeing the same kind of things in the mountain markets as we are in the beach markets, where, it's a lot of ADR driven. But LOS is actually staying somewhat normal in those markets. Those are big weekend markets. One of the things though I want to make sure we talk about on this call is when we start talking about ADRs, one of the concerns that we've had this year, and I'd like to hear the other panelists' concern on it, or thought process on this, is with embed fees. So if you guys notice with the evolution of embed fees, where people are actually now able to tie in cleaning fees, service fees, all of that to rent, it really becomes very difficult to comp your ADRs to other comp sets, right? Because if they're throwing in all their fees in there, your ADR is obsolete. So we've actually switched over to a metric where we're looking at GPN, gross per night. And I really feel like that's going to be the next kind of thing that we need to start looking at as an industry, is really what's the consumer gross per night that they're paying. Obviously, we need to maintain ADRs for the homeowner side, but on the guest standing side, it's so hard to comp ADRs at this point. So yeah, I just want to put that out there for the group because I feel like that's going to be a big talking point for us going forward in the industry.
Yeah. I think that makes a ton of sense. Does anyone want to comment on that real quick before we ask Kelley what's going on in her markets?
I mean, to add to what Chad said, we are feeling that as well. Shopping comps is extremely difficult because, everyone has fees and you don't know if what's happening or if it's an unbooked rate. You just don't know if that homeowner has increased that rate significantly just to see if they could try to book it. Because we get homeowners to say, well, I'll increase it. And if not, I'm going to come in for the week. So then you don't know if that's a true standing rate. I mean, there are so many variables to it. I know we kind of take everything with a grain of salt when we do our comp sets, or we'll compare our all-in costs to their all-in costs. But I know also on our end, we are starting to look at our fees and trying to see shop fees from other companies as well to make sure that we're currently in line with those on top of revenue.
Now, but Whitney, how would you comp the fees if they're embedding them into rent? That's the question. That's the concern that we're having, right? Because like Airbnb at this point, they're attempting to not want you to show any fees, so they're forcing you to embed them into rent, right? So it's almost impossible.
Yeah, I will say that we typically don't shop Airbnb as much. I know we shop our local competitors. So in our market, we can. I mean, not everyone is going to show their cards and show exactly what every single fee is. But we do have our data analyst team going and shopping fees. So to the best of our ability, again, we don't know what it's truthful or not.
Rick, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on what Whitney just said, we're again a little bit of a smaller portfolio than the rest of the panel, but we primarily focus on, again, we're not shopping Airbnb quite as much, but Chad, we feel your pain. We're actually in the process of going through all that right now and kind of looking at that. So I think that that's a great call out. But for us, I think it's more or less knowing what our strategy is to our owners and to our potential consumer, and then at the same token, also knowing what really our competitors are also doing, so that whenever we are shopping more localized comp rates, again, not looking on the Airbnb side, we have a better understanding of where we're sitting from a strategy standpoint and from a value standpoint to our potential customers.
Perfect. Kelley, you got a lot to choose from. Give us a little overview of like some examples for what's going on, and then you can, if you find the ADR comp shopping interesting, you can circle back, or you can take us somewhere else.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the options. I'll attempt to give it as creative of a response as possible. Given everything that everybody just said, I agree with all of it. I think some of the highlights there, as Rick mentioned with trends, I think that's huge. It goes without saying that 2023 is a lot different than last year and any year before it. And so really watching what's going on in the current time. I know that sounds obvious, but if I had $1 for every time somebody said 2022 ADR, I wouldn't have to work ever again in my life. So we're trying really hard to get people to focus on the current stats. Of course, you have to use last year and previous years as a benchmark, kind of as a fundamental building piece for what you want in the future. You don't want to tell owners or clients that they're expected to make less money, even if that's the reality. You got to kind of make it a little creative. So it's really watching both of those things. Tools like Key Data have really helped us a lot. I think to sort of piggyback off of the fees and ADR conversation, I think it's a lot about aesthetics and the promo codes and all that kind of stuff, making people feel like they're getting a deal, making people feel like they're not paying 6 fees. It's like that running joke where you book an Airbnb and it's like $400 total, and then all of a sudden the checkout's like $1,800. Trying not to have that happen, but staying competitive. It's difficult when you're competing against RBOs that don't have the overhead that property management companies have. So you have to stay true to your business. You can't lose money on a transaction, but at the same time, you don't want to tell owners that we got to raise our fees, so we got to come down a little bit on your rate. So it's a fine line, but I think getting a little creative with how you can roll up fees into the rent, and really just looking at the overall average rent total, or the over overall average total stay value, including fees. That's really been helpful to look at in key data. Of course, that's going to account for ADR and length of stay, but it's a good metric to look at as you're benchmarking and comparing, because regardless of if you're rolling up your rent and fees and all that kind of stuff, how you're doing it, at the end of the day, what is the guest looking at when they go to check out? You know, so we're focusing really heavily on those stats in addition to just ADR. I think it's I say RevPAR a lot more than I ever did in the past years, I'll say, just because we're really trying to drive home the fact that it's a different market and we can't just set rates and forget about it. We have to be constantly watching. So the more you can set up a structure from the beginning with a tool like Wheelhouse, get those settings in place, and as best you can be proactive, I think that's really the best you can ask for. And there's a lot of things that you can do to be proactive with the booking windows and the lead days and all that. Of course, history doesn't always work the way it did in the past, but it's the best gauge that we have. And so far it's been, I would say, pretty successful, just to kind of lean on that. And it gives clients and owners a little bit of comfort. It reduces some of that stress and the ambiguity of all of it. I think that's where a lot of frustration comes in, them not knowing. So we can kind of give them a general strategy of how we're reacting to the market trends. It's trying to stay in the current as much as possible. Our markets are all different, as Chad mentioned, with ski markets. It's very specific to the region. I think in general, as everybody knows, demand has smoothed out across the country globally for vacation rentals. It's just kind of natural that that would happen. And so I think that's more important than ever that we rely on tools like Wheelhouse, property management systems, all that stuff. The technology, I think, is extremely important. You can have the best revenue management strategy in the world, but if you don't have the tools and the tech to actually execute it, it really doesn't matter. So we're leaning on Wheelhouse a lot. We're leaning on key data a lot, really, to try to support the conversation that it's not going to be as good as 2022, but 2024 is the best we can do to try to be proactive. I think is we're going to beat 2023. I honestly think that 2024 could be a stronger year revenue wise if we execute some of those strategic elements. So I'll cut my ramble right there.
I do want to come back a little bit to what Chad said. I think there's a lot of good tidbits there, and there's one of them I'm already thinking about coming back to, Kelley, so thank you. When we think about the comp shopping, though, to a certain degree, people have been putting rates into their rent for a while, and that's actually almost beneficial because you can see really what they're charging. It's harder to capture like these disparate fee structures so that you think they're pricing a certain way, but they're actually much higher. But now that it's a little bit more difficult for us to like easily shop these rates, I think it comes down to something that was really relevant when I was a revenue manager at Stay Alfred, which is, and you see a lot more on the hotel side, which is you have to think about what your target minimum length of stay is, because you can't like separate these fees as easily for the consumer side. You really do have in your pricing strategy a target minimum length of stay, and there are going to be some minimum length of stays that you're not optimized in. We don't really generally have the capability in our space to optimize for every length of stay at the same time. And even if you had the ability to offer different prices for every length of stay, you probably wouldn't optimize them all for the consumer. So I think when you're shopping these things, you do need to do a little work around like, what's the kind of length of stay we're targeting? What's length of stays that we would like to get? You know, you can probably optimize around 2, and then also think about like, okay, well, as the booking window changes, how does that change for me? It's like in summer, I'm targeting a 7-night length of stay. That's really what I want to be shopping. But once I get within 60 days, I need to be shopping the 4-night because I need to be competitive there, and I'd like to get the 7-night. And then within 2 weeks, I need to be relevant for a 2-night stay. And that kind of changes how and when you shop the rates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I don't know if anyone is doing that or how you guys are. A good question I saw in the thing is, how are you guys, what are you using to shop your rates right now? Like, what tools do you have available? What do you have your teams do would be a good kind of question, I think, for folks.
Mostly key data, I would say. Comp sets, just looking at that. Wheelhouse provides pretty good comps as well. But as far as those asking rates, we use the comp sets in Wheelhouse. The benchmarking is great, but of course that's the booked rate. So as far as looking at advertised prices, it's a little bit difficult. The best that I've found is in Wheelhouse, or I'm sorry, in Key Data. I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but I could
Same
look.
data. Yeah.
Definitely key data on our side. And then, obviously looking at, not just the rate side of things, but the seasonality trends. We've been having a lot of conversation about the seasonality trends. If you can at least mirror your seasonality trends to what you're kind of expecting, and then you can vary it up on that. But yeah, key data for us for sure.
When you guys shop, do you shop? Because I know, Chad, you were talking about Airbnb. Whitney said you don't use Airbnb. Do you pick like a primary OTA you shop, or are you shopping all of them?
Well, so I was just throwing Airbnb out there because they were the ones that are leading the embed fees. Realistically, when we do price shop, we price shop local competitors in the market, right? That's the best way to do it. Airbnb and Verba. If we were to pick an OTA, it'd be Verba between the two. But more times than not, it's actually local competitors. So like 360 Blue. Yeah.
I see you, Chad. I see you.
Is that true for everyone? Rick, do you?
100%. 100%. Yeah. Key data all the way. And again, just shopping local competitors primarily.
Perfect. Cool. Well, if anyone else wants to comment on this, feel free to. I'm going to start moving us to a question I think is pretty interesting for this time of year, especially for me. I've been talking to a lot of people about holidays as a pricing guy. But how was Thanksgiving for you guys? What do you think, what's your strategy looking like for Christmas? And I'll add a few caveats if you want to kind of talk about here. One, if you could tell folks kind of like roughly how the portfolio does over Thanksgiving and Christmas. Is that a sellout for you? Is there vacancy? I think that's really interesting. We have a lot of different markets. And two, has anything happened for Thanksgiving that has informed what you guys are doing for Christmas? So why don't we start with Whitney this time, and let's have a conversation about the holidays.
Yeah, so historically, Thanksgiving has not been a sold out date. I will say 2021 and 2022, we were a sold out. That was a sold out time period. Going into 2023, we did not sell out for Thanksgiving. We were pretty close, but we did have to come in pretty heavy in the last month to try to discount, and we did drop our minimum length of stay. We do require a 7-night minimum for Thanksgiving, but no date restriction as of your arrival and departure, just a true 7-night. So about, I think, 4 weeks in advance, we did drop that down to a 3-night minimum, just to capture anything that we could. And then leading into Christmas has historically never been a sellout market for us. New Year's Eve a little bit more, but Christmas has usually been a lot lighter, and we dropped our minimum length of stay as well. We had a 5-night and we dropped it to a 3-night, and just been far, far more competitive in our rates than I think we've ever been probably for December, just to see, what we can fill up for the remainder of the year.
How early were you dropping the minimum length of stay on these?
About a month out.
About a month out?
Yeah. Historically, we've always done it 7 to 10 days prior to, and with the recent trends of 2023, we've been dropping them about a month out, maybe a little bit sooner, depending on how we're pacing compared to the market.
And when you dropped those minimum length of stays, were you also dropping rate at the same time?
Not necessarily. We would drop the minimum length of stay first, see where our pickup was, and then if we needed to drop rate after that, we would proceed after. But we would start out with just dropping minimum length of stay, and then guiding into it maybe a week or so after, if we weren't picking up as much, we would drop rate.
Based on what you saw for Thanksgiving, has that affected, are you essentially applying the same program for Christmas, or would you even think, like, when you think about next year, how does that inform how you guys are going to price manage those time periods next year?
So it did impact how we price Christmas. I think we started putting it on our radar a lot sooner. Once we realized we were very much in the booking window for Thanksgiving, we already started focusing on the Christmas, New Year's time period. December has always been obviously a big last push for everybody, but in this time period, we really, really were trying to drive occupancy. And then leading in, I just think overall our mind shift has completely changed as far as, you know, hey, we're heavily more on discounting. We're going to shop more competitively. We historically have never offered promos for the 360 brand. I think that's something maybe going forward we will start offering. But I know we do offer guest facing discounts when they do call in, and, you know, handing that discount over the phone does seem to go a long way for guests. But leading into 2024, it's going to be a far more aggressive year to try to drive occupancy. I think, like Kelley said, there is opportunity for 2024. I think trends are going to be very similar, but if you attack it in a different way and you're far more aggressive and willing to adjust sooner, I think it can come out being higher than 2023.
Yeah. Would anyone like to jump in? I can call on someone too. Thank you, Whitney. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Whitney was saying. I mean, we were sold out for Thanksgiving. No, just playing. But
you are. We saw.
No. 100%. No. Obviously, for our size of our portfolio, we have different strategies for obviously different markets and different bedroom sizes and so forth, right? And Thanksgiving and Christmas historically have always been your larger luxury homes. Your larger properties, not so much your one bedroom condos. It's where people come together. So realistically, we did basically the exact same thing that Whitney did. We lowered LOS requirements. And then end up dropping rates, but we did use the promo code to drive the LOS a little bit longer, trying to get those out there. That was very beneficial. And our Christmas strategy was obviously very affected by what happened over Thanksgiving. Very similar to what Whitney was saying on that. And then looking at really what we're looking at in 24, we're really looking at saying, all right, maybe what we should attempt to do at this point is get the higher rates, but maybe not hold on to the LOS a little bit right now for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we're monitoring it. We're really testing it out right now, looking at for 24. Unfortunately for Thanksgiving and Christmas with your larger homes, your booking window is more than likely passed for the most part. So you're really kind of having to give it away at this point. So yeah,
that actually reminds me of something that when I was back at Stay Alfred and we were scaling in a number of these markets that had big events. When we started out, you have 10, 15, 20, even 50 units. We used to be really restrictive on the minimum length of stay. And as we got larger, we found that ended up being a liability. Our booking window shifted considerably shorter. And the approach that we took in that regard was we started spiking the primary night price and reducing the length of stay and adding restrictions over time. Now, we had a lot of similar inventory, so you have to do a little bit more segmentation. You don't want to give away your top home for 2 nights, but we used the shorter length of stay earlier to decide, okay, now we're comfortable actually restricting this because we don't need as many people to look to sell out. And that was something that I think may become kind of relevant here for some of these folks is, dropping these minimum length of stays earlier, maintaining your price, or even spiking just the primary night. One thing I do think is interesting, Chad, you also have some markets I'm sure that do sell out Thanksgiving and kind of Christmas. How have they been behaving, and how have you been treating them in your portfolio where those are going to be really, really solid for, I don't know, ski markets, stuff like that?
Yeah, obviously, a lot of those markets that normally do sell for Thanksgiving and Christmas are going to be your mountain ski markets, but you really have to look at, obviously the snowfall, if they're going to have snow in those markets. And the other one apparently is leaf season. I've never heard of leaf season. It's a big thing in Tennessee. Those markets, they do sell out. And a lot of those, though, are going to be your 3-night stay. So you don't really hold on to a long LOS in those particular markets, unless it's, like we said, your luxury home. But we have seen in those markets, a lot of those, we do peak the primary night. We do peak Thanksgiving, or we do peak Christmas night, and we, capture an LOS on that. So those markets have behaved fairly similar to what we were expecting.
Did you see any issues with pacing on them? Or any examples of good pacing versus bad pacing that caused you to do something different from the rest of the portfolio?
In those particular markets, the pacing honestly stayed about flat year over year. Those markets are just generally, they're quick drive to markets. They historically, so no, to answer that question, we did not see much of a difference in those markets.
Cool. I'm just fishing.
Yeah, no, that's good. Actually, there is a question there though by Z Perry that I think is definitely interesting. If we may not have time to broach it, but the cancellation policies and changing cancellation policies, and I don't know, we may not have time to broach it, but I think that'd be a great subject at some point.
Yeah. Let's circle back, unless, we'll obviously bring it up if someone talks about that as something they're doing. But we'll be talking about kind of what we're planning for in the future. So that might come up. Just so people know, you're welcome to put questions in here. I don't normally address them. So I apologize for that, but I do keep them in mind. And you're also welcome to reach out to me, maybe the other folks, if they want to give up their email to chat later. Also, Darm is coming up. So if you're going to be there, you can come talk to us. Rick, why don't you tell us about what's going on in your holidays? How is that market for holidays generally? I think you said you are doing well. Let us know if doing well means market's sold out, you're sold out, or market's at 60 and you're at 65.
No, so I mean, kind of like Whitney and Chad, very similar market. I'm not too far away from Destin, ourselves. So very similar market trends. We do see, typically a pretty good bump, obviously on the holiday weeks. But again, it's nothing like summer or pure peak time for us. We certainly increase our ADR, during the peak holiday. I'll say the length of stay is certainly the way that has been successful for us. So a lot of our mega homes, kind of to mirror really what Whitney was saying, most of our larger properties that we would typically keep a 7-night restriction on during peak, going into the holidays, we're set at about 4, initially. And then as we get a little bit closer for some, we might even have dropped them down to 3 just based off any gaps that might have been available, et cetera. So, the length of the stay strategy, clearly, I think for us is key. And we saw that, I think too, we have to take a more global approach with how we're looking at vacation habits. Look at the inflation that everybody's dealing with over the course of 2023. And, I'm kind of the mindset that a lot of our clientele, they don't want to compromise on the quality of their stay, but that might be reducing from a 7-night stay down to a 5. So whereas last year I could say at, my favorite house, it would have cost me this much for a 7-night. This year it's going to cost me the same amount for a 5-night. Right. So looking at some of those trends too, I think are important. And again, I think it's really just the full balancing act of finding all of those and executing them. But that's really what we did, kind of, not to get too off track here with a holiday question, but we did that strategy for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we actually came in the positive in all of our KPIs for November and December. So really clearly it paid off for Thanksgiving. We're already, far outpacing December. There are a couple of problematic weeks that my team is focused on, and really I'm partnering with my marketing manager and other, area resources to try to, maybe drive a couple of promos. We do have one kind of farther out area of our portfolio, and we did do a targeted marketing promotion specifically for that area, and the results were fantastic. So again, it's not even just revenue management, it's really kind of partnering with the entire organization in order to drive these homes. So Chad mentioned promo codes earlier. As a premier, try to be more of a premier brand, we typically in the past have always steered away from promo codes, but again, starting to utilize those a little bit as well. And again, that helped for that one specific kind of outset market area within our portfolio. And that's my tangent, guys. Sorry.
No, it's great. Kelley, why don't you tell us a little bit about the holidays? And then I think after that, I do want to follow up on a little bit on the promo codes, mainly how you guys are distributing those. But Kelley, first, tell us a little bit, pick some examples from your portfolio that might be interesting about what's going on for holidays this year.
Yeah, I think it honestly depends on whether or not property managers or clients are willing to be flexible and to adjust settings like length of stay or price. I think also that we dictate a lot of the different aspects of booking, like the booking window, the length of stay. I think that we have a lot more play in that than we realize when it comes to pricing. I think we all act like the booking window is shrinking, but guests aren't stupid. They're starting to figure out that when your prices are way too high for way too long, and then you don't have any bookings, what's going to happen? I mean, it doesn't take rocket science. All of us can give the answer. So I think that really what happened was if we had clients or property managers that were willing to adapt to time-based settings or changes, that was really where we saw the most success. Last year, it seems like ADR was just sky high. Anything that you put out there booked. And so that set the bar really high, which is difficult coming into that with those expectations. But if you can convince people that if you look at that bell curve, not to get too data nerdy, but if you look at that bell curve, when are you getting the most bookings and at what price? And if you can really try to drive into that sweet spot, that's really where you're going to see the most success. If you hold your rates high too long, you're going to tank your rates and RevPAR is going to be terrible and revenue, and no one's going to be happy. So we've had some clients that were really happy with how Thanksgiving turned out, how Christmas is pacing. We have others that are like, well, I'm not getting my 2022 rates, so this is an absolute disaster, and might as well close shop. So it's kind of like a split situation there, but we have seen really great success, like I said, with those that have been willing to adapt to those time-based changes, especially minimum length of stay. That's been really huge. It's actually gone both ways too, not only just reducing the minimum length of stay as you get closer to the arrival date, but also pushing occupancy up by having a longer length of stay farther out where you might be able to get it. So we've really tried to look at that data and basically say that you've left some nights on the table because there was an opportunity there to get more and you had 3. So maybe you just got 3, maybe you got 4, maybe you got 5. Being flexible is great. But at the same time, if everybody is only booking a 5-night stay, you might as well try to capitalize on that. Same with the price too. I think that if you can give guests a value, if it looks like it's a value, that goes a lot farther than looking like you're slapping on promos left and right. I think that looks like you're scrambling. Maybe it's just because we know how it works, but when I see property managers advertising homes for discounted rates, it's like, what that means. It didn't book and you need it to book. So we're going to make it look like it's this great deal, but in reality, we just need you to book it. So I try to be a little bit more strategic, a little bit more creative with that and how those are presented, especially with luxury portfolios. It doesn't look great to owners or guests if you're just slapping them out there. So I'm probably getting way off track a little bit with the conversation, but yeah, as far as holidays go, that's really where we've seen the most success, the flexibility and willing to adapt to the market trends and what's going on.
Yeah, the holidays really are interesting to me. I've talked to a lot of people from all over the country, and one of the things that kind of gets me is in a lot of areas of the country, like Thanksgiving, sometimes stronger, sometimes weaker, but Thanksgiving, Christmas are not sold out in every market. But the posted rates are almost as high as summer.
Mhm.
How do you guys? They can be, especially at certain times of the year. And I'm always, you have a very wide range of actualized pricing. So I think with the holidays, a big component is timing, because we know most people aren't going to book at like summer rates, but some people do. And I think coming out of 2023, like the story of this year is just like everyone is too late on their timing. Almost everyone is too late. Rick's talking to us about March. I've talked to a lot of people who mentioned seeing pacing in March. That's pretty early, right? When you start to make these decisions so that you can make these adjustments. But how would you guys generally time? I think, Whitney, you said kind of like in that 30, 60-day range. How are you thinking about timing for next year? And is that actually influencing also how you're thinking about next year in general? Because this is kind of like an early barometer for how things might start to go.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the data as far as how things paced out, and it's hard because if you didn't do it correctly the year before, you don't want to use that as a guideline. But in general, if you look at the market and you kind of reverse engineer a little bit and look at when did things pick up in the market, when did you pick up, you can really tell when the majority of bookings came in. And so if you back into your data and what prices you advertised, what prices you sold, like your unbooked versus your booked, you can kind of start to determine what went wrong or what went well. So I think the as well as you can try to do with your own data, you really have to stay on top of what happened in the market and when it happened. There's going to be differences, and a lot of it could be leaving money on the table. The price was too low far out, or maybe it was too high. So a lot of that is, like, did we cause this behavior, or was this actually a reflection of true demand? And I have this question a lot. I don't necessarily know the answer to it, but as far as seasonality goes, when we look at that, You know, are we basing that off of the price adjusting to the demand, or is that really a seasonality of true volume? You know, so it's the same thing with the peak or with the holiday dates as well. Like what you want to get, sure, outside of like, let's say the 90th percentile of lead days, push your rate to whatever you got in 2022 and try to get it. But if you can't, you have to be willing to let the rate come down. It's back to that like bell curve example. So that's, I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly, but that's really the approach that I would take looking at next year is kind of looking at what didn't go well this year to determine what to do next year. Not necessarily what did we do, when did we book, because we have no idea what actually could have happened. So I think you have to compare it to what you wanted to have happen and what actually happened, and then step into it that way with that kind of approach, as uncomfortable of an exercise as that may be.
Whitney, do you want to tell us a little bit about how the holidays might be making you think about next year?
Yeah, so kind of piggyback on Kelley, you know, we were still in December of 2022, we were still kind of riding that COVID high. We opened our calendar 21 months in advance. So we open in March. So we opened in March 2023 for the remainder of all of 2024. So the timing of when a booking happened was critical, because if it booked in June of 2023 for 2024, that rate was going to be extremely high. So it's just kind of gauging on when we booked it and to see, okay, were we just, you know, were we lucky and we captured that super high booking, or is that actually the rate we should be for the surrounding weeks? So really analyzing our data, but like Kelley mentioned, if it didn't go as well, it's kind of hard to check your pacing, because you know, we probably are going to be pacing a little bit behind because of that COVID high, but really shopping the market and seeing our growth over the last month. Are we equivalent to the market? Are we higher than the market? Are we outpacing? So I think really focusing on market data is going to be what our game plan going forward is. I mean, we can't change 2023. We can't change what happened, but we can take our data and we can grow with it and pivot for 2024.
I think that point you made is really critical, which is as you're analyzing your performance, being really aware of when those bookings came in and grouping by that. Because I've talked to a few other folks who it's just like, God, I have all these listings that booked so early, and I know we're not going to position anything, but like I have to like just track these units separately because it's too early for me to talk to the owner about lowering their rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rick or Chad, do you guys have some thoughts about how the holidays are influencing your strategy going forward?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say necessarily just the holidays for us, but I think really, you know, all the lessons learned in 2023, you know, looking ahead, you know, it's just that combination of, you know, helping our owners understand the trends, right? I've spent a lot of time partnering with, you know, my property managers internally, my marketing team internally, helping them truly understand that there is that shift that was taking place. And most of them now, luckily, are pretty much on board with that, and they understand. So looking at, you know, looking into the future, you know, I think great point as far as the booking windows go, as well, because some of the ADR is still a little skewed for 2023, depending on when it was booked, and even possibly into next year, right? So understanding that, but then looking ahead, you know, historically, you know, we may have been, just as an example, raising our, you know, projected ADR by 10%. We have to scale back on that, obviously. And so again, it's taking the strategy now, and I think educating our owners that, hey, in 2021, 2022, we could throw out whatever. Now we have to be a little bit lower. We're still going to push to try to draw some increases, try to make those gains, but it's going to be at a little bit more of a balanced approach, kind of like I mentioned at the very start, you know, and a little bit of a slower push out of the gate, just from an ADR perspective. But this is also what we're going to do is focus a little bit more on what doors potentially is that going to open in terms of occupancy, which still is going to equate to you gaining and outgaining revenue in 2024 versus 2023. So, you know, again, we have a lot of new owners, on our program that really kind of came on board during COVID. So again, it's been an educational piece, I think, for us, basically to help them fully understand that was the unicorn congratulations, you tasted it a little bit, but now we're going back to, again, a more balanced approach
Reality.
and, targeting length of stays, looking at marketing strategies. I think being as proactive as possible, understanding the trends, identifying the trends, having the courage to make those decisions as soon as we can. I think that that's the key to our success.
My biggest takeaway is really looking at the future trends earlier, right? So I think that that's part of where the miss was for the industry, is that we really started looking at previous year's booking window, so forth. But at that point, it wasn't too late, but we got to get into that data a little bit earlier for those seasons, and be more proactive. That's really what 23 taught us. Be more proactive earlier. If that makes any sense.
I had a boss that used to say, and this was at Stay Alfred, so it was very relevant. He said, "Hope is not a strategy." For a revenue manager. And
man, sometimes you just gotta hope it works. No, but I mean, you've got to be more proactive earlier in 24. And I think if we do that, do what I think Kelley and Whitney said earlier, 24 is looking like it's shaping up to be very similar to 23. But if we're more proactive earlier, we would have no problem beating 23 numbers in 24.
Yeah.
That's really a thing that I think is really important, which is I think people should have done better this year. I actually thought after kind of last summer's change that people would be a little bit more conservative this year, and you just saw that they weren't. But there was a lot of revenue managers that had a lot of success within the constraints of being in a kind of a down market because they saw stuff early. Now, the question is the market, are revenue managers and PMs going to react? Are they going to be more conservative and look to build up their occupancy, in which case you can do really well? If, that's the question. Are people going to react reasonably? Are owners going to let rates come down? Are PMs going to actually budget more conservatively? And in either case, if they're not, you're, as a revenue manager, in a really good position, because if you undercut people and stretch your window out and build a base of business, you can do that if everyone else is too highly priced.
Right.
I don't know.
I think to Rick's point, though, what he was talking about is these new homeowners that bought in COVID. That's a hard owner conversation to have. So managing owner expectations in these markets, it's a huge balancing act. And I think we were trying to manage the owner expectation while trying to lower it down. Those are very conflicting things. I mean, a lot of these homeowners way overpaid for these houses, and they're not getting the ROI they expected.
Absolutely.
You got to cycle through those expectations. They're going to realize it's not property management specific. You're going to get, if you're at a loss, you're going to be at a loss somewhere else. That's just how the market is. You can jump around, you can try to do it yourself, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's economics, right? Like what the market has as far as supply, what's going on with demand. We know that's a little bit reduced, or at least it's spread out more. So I think prices are going to come down. I don't know how
they have to.
I don't know how strategic the market's going to be. I mean, I say the market like it's this like global entity of government or something, but as far as property management goes and individual owners, I don't know how much they're going to be doing what we're doing. I don't know if the RBOs are gathering on webinars and talking about it. I'm guessing not. So I don't know. I think we probably are still going to be at an advantage, but I do think the prices are going to come down. There's going to be more competition. I honestly welcome that, because I can't stand trying to compare and being like, why are they so high? Why are we so low? Just trying to understand what's going on, what their mindset is. So I honestly am looking forward to an environment that makes a little bit more sense as far as pricing goes. But it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what actually happens in 2024.
One question I have for you guys is, because we kind of are in budgeting season, are your teams doing anything different in how you're planning to interface with your owner relation teams next year? I think post-COVID, it was like they got separated, owners did whatever, we probably would make the money. This year, it was like, why do I have to talk to all these owners, and why is my owner relation team reaching out to me every week? What are you guys doing to kind of deal with that coming into next year?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first on that one, if that's all right, Kelley. So one thing we really focused on this year, it was a project and a half, but we actually project each property on the month level for ADR, occupancy, and departures. And realistically, the owner relations reps have that at their fingertips, so they know what the expectation is compared to previous years and so forth. But realistically, doing that at the unit level allows us to have better conversations with the homeowner and more proactive ones, especially if we budgeted down ADRs, where maybe we budgeted down ADRs, but we increase number of nights. We can have those proactive conversations, right? So the biggest thing for us was projecting that on the unit level, which doing 5,000 units was a project and a half, but we got it done.
Easy stuff.
Yeah.
I think ours mainly was like transparency with owners of, hey, here's what's happening in the market. We realize, we're not hiding our numbers compared to last year. We're not hiding, what you booked at. Just really being transparent and saying, hey, here's what we're facing. Here's what we're doing to better improve, capturing and stuff. We understand those homeowners who bought in COVID bought extremely high. Their projections were probably in the heat of the moment, they were extremely high, and just saying, hey, your projection was based off of that day you bought the home and what the current market was. So just really educating our, property managers and owner services team on how to have these conversations. And if we need to, sometimes we're hopping in, having the conversations with homeowners and really addressing, saying like, hey, here are the logistics, here's the data supporting our decisions and what we're doing. And then usually from there, it does go, they apprehend very well and they take our information. But I think just being transparent and saying, hey, like, it's not an us, it's it's everybody. We're all feeling it, every market. So.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off that, again, much smaller portfolio here than the rest of the panel. So I'm potentially a little bit more, I can be a little bit more tailored and more agile, if you will, with some of these. But Whitney, 100%, I think it's all about the transparency, the educational piece, and really, once we kind of hit midsummer of 2023, we understood what was happening. That's when a lot of those conversations started for us. If I had $1 for every benchmark report that I had to put together for an owner this year, I could take off next month, right? So again, it's that educational piece, helping them understand that it's not specific to just their home or even just this area. Really utilizing a lot of that data and sending it to them, I think is just going to help us have a much smoother 2024, at least from an internal relationship standpoint.
Yeah. I think just painting it as an opportunity for them, whether or not they've done well or not done well, if you can use data of your own portfolio and you can group your units together. We had a client out in Big Sky. I brag about them all the time because they've done every single thing that we've asked and it's worked out really well. They created a grouping system. So they have, for example, like 4-bedroom mountain homes that have ski access. So you could look at the performance of that group. And if there's going to be outliers, some are doing really well, some are doing not so well. Why is that? And then comparing the performance of each one of those groups across the others. That's like true data, it's your own data, but then comparing that kind of like a gut check or a sanity check to what's going on in the market. I mean, people are competitive. Owners are humans too. They want to do better. They want to do better than they did last year. They want to do better than their neighbors. You hear about that all the time. So if you could present that to them in a way that looks at it like it's an opportunity, I think you get better results than if it's just like, here, you didn't do great, we need to lower your rate. You have to kind of explain to them what the opportunity is. As far as making that actually happen across the organization, I think standardizing the conversation around settings and things that you're actually doing, it's hard because owner reps, they don't know really necessarily what you've done. They're just the messenger. But if they understand the general strategy, for peak season, we're doing this, and for shoulder season, we're doing this, and this is what we do if then, that they don't necessarily have to come to you every single time because they should already know that. Not always, but it creates a much more efficient process as far as owner communication goes. And I think it strengthens your credibility as well. If your team is saying the same thing that you're saying, looks a lot better than, we'll check with them and let you know. It creates the comfort that you're actually all working together and all on the same page and all have the same objective, looking at the same things. So easier said than done, but for the clients that we've been able to achieve that with, it's been night and day, seriously.
Yeah. Well, we're getting to the end. I think Kelley, I just had a thought, like the we've even been talking about it at Wheelhouse, and it was something that we did when I was at Stay Alfred. We didn't have owners, but we did it with our sales team. But the revenue management team did macro presentations for the other teams, right? So just like it's like everyone should be able to speak to the macro of your company so that they don't have to go ask someone. They are the authority.
Right.
And it's not too hard on a monthly or quarterly basis for your rev team to just give a little presentation about like I mean, you'd be surprised how many people don't understand seasonality, and just giving them an idea of like, this is what you should expect us to be talking about right now. Really, really helpful for all teams to be aligned, really helpful for them when they're trying to ask you questions as a revenue manager. So really cool stuff. Thank you guys for all joining us and listening to this great conversation. Whitney, Rick, Chad, Kelley, really appreciate having you guys on. It was a wonderful conversation. If you have any last words, feel free to, we'll go around the horn and you can say them. And then I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for having me, John. It's been a pleasure. Lovely meeting everybody, and I look forward to doing this in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to seeing it. Hopefully everyone at Darm.
Yeah. See y'all at Darm.
Likewise. Nashville. Let's go.
Thanks for having me. We'll hopefully see everyone soon.
Thanks,
Have a good
guys.
day.
Awesome.
Get it. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much,
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.